Welcome to Psychology of the Daf. We are in Gemara Pesachim, Daf Yud Tes. Now, this Gemara discusses a series of rabbinic decrees which added additional levels of impurity to a variety of objects. One of the oddest decrees that you will find in this list was declaring holy scrolls, scripture, a Tanakh, a Sefer Torah, to be impure. Why would they do that? Does that not seem counterintuitive to declare Kisvei Kodesh to be Tameh? So the Gemara in Shabbos on Daf Yudalad Amud Aleph explains where this came from, and that the common folk would make the following appraisal. They would say to themselves, Truma food is holy, and Scripture are holy, so why not store them together? Make sense? Well, it does, sort of, except the problem is that with such reasoning, mice will come and gnaw at the food and also gnaw at the scrolls. Therefore, the rabbis declared the scrolls to be tameh, so that people would keep their truma separate from the scrolls. Now, that's an interesting explanation, but there's something about it that's hard to understand. Why wouldn't the Rabbanim just make a public service announcement informing people that it's a bad idea to store food next to the scrolls? Why not, right? Wouldn't they just say, oh, okay, I didn't realize that? From here we see that the common folk lacked trust in the rabbinic establishment and were resistant to direction from them. Yet, despite their mistrust and resistance, they apparently had certain hard and fast customs that the rabbis could use to influence them. In particular, they were very careful with certain kinds of tumah, certain kinds of impurity. We even find a startling Mishnah in Nedarim Pereg Gimel, Mishnah Dalet. Look at the Bartanura over there. And oddly enough, thieves who would even murder, yes, they existed even then, and some of them were Jews, thieves who even murder would not transgress the boundary of defiling truma. So people would sometimes make an oath that this is truma in order to protect them from having the thieves take the truma, even though the thieves would rob and kill, but they won't touch the truma bread, which is fascinating. So here too, the rabbis used the boogeyman of declaring the scrolls, the Kisvei Kodesh, to be impure in order that the common folk would separate their truma from their Kisvei Kodesh and not store them together. Now, another startling example of the way in which the rabbis used the boogeyman of tumah, of impurity, in order to enact various helpful social control mechanisms comes in regard to, of all things, sexual abuse prevention. You can imagine if in modern times we have difficulty discussing sexual abuse in public, in ancient times where people's patterns of speech and behavior were far more modest, it would be even more difficult. Yet the rabbis were apparently sophisticated and understood the dangers, at least the dangers they knew of in their times. So let us take a look at a fascinating discussion that comes from a Gemara in Shabbos on Daf Yud Zayin Amud Beis. So the Gemara over there says that Omer of Nachum Bar Yitzchak, Gozr al Tina Goy Shemetami Beziva, Shelo Yetinak Yisrael Rugel Etzel B'Mishkav Zachar. So Rav Nachum Bar Yitzchak says that they made a decree that Gentile children will have the status of a very severe tumah called tumas zav. We won't get into that right now, but it's a very severe tumah. And why? In order that the Jewish parents would not let their children play with the Goyish children. And what's the fear of that? Mishkav Zachar, homosexual relations. What? Where'd that come from? What are we talking about? Obviously, there was a fear that in some way the children would be molested, either by their peers or by other adults in the home. Now, again, just as in the previous case, why don't we ask the rabbis to just tell people, hey, be careful before you let your child play with a neighbor, certainly with a neighbor that's not of your faith, who might have different values. Well, be careful. Why wouldn't that have been enough? So once again, the common folk either could not believe, tolerate, or accept that their lovely neighbors could molest their children. And so the rabbis took the boogeyman of impurity, which somehow people felt more fearful about than even sex abuse, and that was their way of protecting the children. So the rabbis came across and said that all these children of people from a different faith were the highest level of tumah. Why? They didn't say why. This way people would keep their kids away from them. But the real reason had nothing to do with tumah at all. It was totally invented in order to protect the children. What do we need to do to protect our children?